Hello, welcome to the Citrus Garden. My name is Christina. This is a message for twin flame divine masculines, or if you don't resonate with that label, it could just be for you if you're trying to work with more masculine energies within yourself. So keep that in mind, take it how it resonates. The main focus of this reading today is what's your current energy, where is an area of focus, or what's something to focus on, and where's an area of growth. So we're going to start with the bottom of the deck energy, which is absolutely lovely. We have the crone and the mentor. So I feel like what this is saying is that in this reading, the overall energy is that you are going through sort of like this crone energy, which is kind of like the ending of something, but sort of gaining the wisdom of whatever that situation was. And I feel like perhaps with the mentor, there may be somebody who's helping you do that, like a therapist or like a teacher or a friend who just has is providing sort of support for you in this situation, whatever it is you're going through. And then you have your forgiveness, which is lovely. I love this card so much, even though it's kind of like a difficult, well, not that it's difficult, but forgiveness implies that there has been hurt in the past, right? So I feel like that's what you're sort of gaining the wisdom of. It's like one thing about forgiveness is that that's sort of like the indication or the sign that you've actually completed your healing. Because if you're still wounded by a situation or something like that, then there's no forgiveness there, right? And that's totally fine. But because you're in this energy of forgiveness, that means that you have healed something that has caused you pain or hurt or harm in the past, which is absolutely lovely. And then we have this Four of Pentacles card, which came out yesterday in the Sagittarius reading. I am going to link it above just in case you have Sagittarius somewhere in your chart. And this card is just so lovely to me, right? It's like something, I feel like perhaps you're focusing on something like very simple and homey, right? Something that's like very comforting and warm, and is giving you happiness in that sort of regard, right? It's like it's providing comfort and warmth is how I'm reading this card today. Very tangible. It's something like perhaps just focusing on like your home or what makes your home comfortable and cozy and warm. Okay, so that's your overall energy, which is absolutely gorgeous. Okay, we're moving on to what is your current energy and where is that momentum taking you? So you have these three interesting cards that came out like this. So Siren, Eternal Child, and the Queen. And then this came out after, the Thanatos, which is talking about sort of like the death process, like in sort of like the underworld kind of energy of like perhaps grieving or mourning, whatever this dynamic is, especially because you have the crone, right? Which talks about sort of an ending, but harvesting or gaining some sort of wisdom because you've reached the end of this cycle is what I'm calling it. And what's interesting here, so I'm going to explain these cards. I'm not exactly sure what the dynamic of this interaction is, but the Siren talks about something has such an allure or draw that it pulls you in, right? It pulls you in even though, because the Siren generally has sort of a negative connotation of like being lustful or right? It's like a trick of some sort, right? It's not real. You have to sort of tie yourself to the mast in order to avoid being drawn into the Siren's call, right? That's sort of how I was getting it. With the Eternal Child here as well, it talks about joy and freedom, right? Joy and freedom, but that can also be with the shadow aspects of like only ever doing things in like how a child would do it and not sort of like the adult, right? Like being sort of in an immature energy. So there could be that dynamic, which is coming to an end. And then you have the Queen, which is the Empress energy, but for some reason it is coming through with like shadow, like the shadow aspects of the Queen, which can be like cruel. It's coming through today for some reason, very much like toxic femininity, is kind of how this is feeling. And I feel like that's what's coming to an end. So you could be working with the feminine energies within yourself that have sort of like this toxic femininity, which could be like jealousy or manipulation or cruelty in some way, or overexpression of like lustful kind of behaviors, right? That's sort of all the like the toxic femininity aspects. But that's what's being sort of ended, right? Ended and shifted in some way with the help of like the crone and forgiveness. Because especially with the first card here, you have the Dreamer of Pentacles, which is with sort of like this lock, right? Like this is the Siren energy of like being pulled in a direction that seems negative in some way, or that there's danger here somehow. And perhaps I feel like in the past you held back from that energy because it kind of feels like if you had fallen if you had a negative interaction in some way, or negative relationship, let's say, with a sort of toxic feminine, I'm just gonna say like that. I don't like those terms, but that's sort of how it's coming through, as someone who had a wounded feminine kind of energy, right? And so felt like they had like jealous tendencies or manipulative tendencies in some way. You perhaps went down that path before, and that caused wounding within yourself, right? But it's like, I feel like you're healing that. That's the part that's being healed in you, because you do have the forgiveness, which is absolutely gorgeous, where it's talking about like, I feel like you're reaching like this end of the cycle where you're seeing that any sort of harm that was caused to you through this like feminine energy, that harm was caused to you because they themselves were experiencing some sort of hurt or harm or whatever that is, right? It's like kind of, I feel like you're seeing that, and it's allowed, because but perhaps you're also in some way, I feel like you're also in some way almost helping this energy to heal within yourself, right? Because it's like, so one thing that I've learned about healing or harm that's sort of passed on, it's like if somebody harms you, that the cause of that harm, for example, jealousy, which is something I have experience with, somebody caused me harm because they were jealous, for example, right? And so that jealousy, the cause of the wounding, is now become a part of me in some way. And so I'm having to release jealous feelings because that's been sort of an energy that's been projected onto me. I hope that makes sense. So it's kind of like if somebody caused you harm, it doesn't have to be jealousy, but because of their own wounding, that wounding now becomes a part of you. And so you're having to release that. And I feel like that's what this forgiveness is talking about, is the healing of the cause of the wounding rather than like the actual wounding itself. I hope that makes sense. But there, because you're having like, you have this like the Thanatos card, it talks about like going under. So I feel like there's this energy in your dynamic today where it's like, I feel like if you've been in sort of this period of like being in the underworld, is what I'm calling it, of like perhaps just being in an energy of quiet and peace, absolutely necessary, because you have here these two cards, if I can pick them up, nourishment and direction, which I absolutely adore, because I feel like whatever this path that you were drawn to, it's kind of just like surrendering yourself to the siren call, because it has a draw to you for some reason, whatever that reason is. It may not be clear. And it's kind of like if you go down that path and just sort of see what happens, there is sort of nourishment or benefit for you in some way if you do sort of go down the siren call path, right? It's like you may have a perception that you shouldn't go this way because blah, 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 fill in the blank. I experienced this energy before and it harmed me, right? But it's like, I feel like this situation is different, and I feel like that's what you're seeing, is that some aspect that you've now gone down towards, because it has such a draw, is actually providing some sort of nourishment. And with the direction, I'm seeing this as like, if you go all the way down to the depths, right? The sea floor, if you touch the sea floor, there's actually something there for you to grasp, right? Like with the crone, it's like you're gaining the wisdom. You're finding like a pearl at the bottom of the sea, and it's actually bringing up this. Like I'm seeing this as being pulled up from the bottom of the sea floor, and it's changing the landscape somehow. It's shifting. I see this as like an ice sheaf, right? Like it's very sort of solid and not moving and cold. So it's like what it is that you're bringing up from the depths is this sort of wisdom or understanding or knowledge, nourishment perhaps, something that is nourishing you, is giving you life, is providing happiness or contentment in some way, and you're pulling it up in a way that's like changing your landscape. That's what this is talking about, which is absolutely gorgeous. It's like you went down this path, and it's like now you're in this Dreamer of Wands energy, which yesterday came through as being like being freed from the belly of the fish, right? It's like you were in that sort of fish, like going down into the depths, but now you're back on the surface and having a new perspective on something. It's like you've completed with the Ouroboros, you've completed some sort of cycle, or like a karmic cycle, or learn the lesson. All of that kind of imagery and all of that is coming through of like you're back at the beginning, you're back on the surface. And then you have this Maktub card, which I absolutely adore, because it talks to me about like a cosmic remote control. But it's coming through a little bit differently today for you, because I feel like it's more so what you're going through. The current energy is like, if you've been trying to like hold yourself back from going in a certain direction, this is almost allowing you to be free of that kind of like, you don't have to resist the flow of where it is you're going, because I feel like this cycle has shown you that no matter where you go, like if you are sort of drawn towards a siren call, I'm putting in quotations, there is absolutely something in that direction for you to gain. There's nourishment in that path, no matter what it is. And it's like you can sort of trust yourself to be able to handle whatever thing comes up for you, because you've reached the point where you understand forgiveness, or you've gained some sort of knowledge, or you're connecting with some aspect. It's like understanding that there's always going to be some sort of treasure or reward for whatever path you're sort of being drawn to. That's sort of how it's feeling. Okay. And then you have here the Lord of Cups, which is so interesting. This card is such a strange energy, because it kind of looks like he's like milking his heart, right? Milking your heart, or there's some sort of like outpouring of emotion, perhaps from your heart, right? There could be some sort of like heart blockage that you're working with. It could be kind of like painful or overwhelming is kind of how it's feeling, or just confusing. You might just be confused about what's happening. I was also getting this feeling of like, you know, when you burn your hand, or like burn, or like there's a wound, there's a cut or something like that on your skin. And then in the healing process, while that wound or burn is healing, the skin around it kind of gets itchy, right? It gets itchy because that's sort of like the indication that there's sort of work being done on healing the skin around it, of like reweaving the skin. That's sort of what the energy that I was getting with this. It's like feeling uncomfortable, or there's like an itchiness or discomfort that is evidence that there is healing happening for you, is kind of how this is feeling today. And I feel like part of this knowledge, with the perception card coming out next, because this card I often see as being like so focused on a task, or having such a specific almost like mindset or way of seeing things, that prevents you from seeing any other thing, right? It's like anything that doesn't, it's a confirmation bias. Anything that doesn't match your personal bias or how you see the world, your mindset, that kind of thing, will not be like reach your consciousness. And so sometimes you do need that sort of like the siren call, which is something that's outside of your natural kind of viewpoint, I want to say. It's something that's outside of your tendencies, your habits, that kind of thing, that is purposely trying to call your attention so that you can have an expansion of your perception, is how this is feeling, right? It's like having like an alarm to almost pull you out of this specific focus that you've been in, which can be beneficial, but can also be sort of limiting in that way. And I feel like what you're gaining here in your current energy is that you can sort of listen to the siren call, because there is something there for you to learn or understand that's pulling you out of your focus right now, because your focus is too rigid in some way, that's preventing you from seeing almost like a more beautiful kind of distraction, or a beautiful, not a distraction, a beautiful kind of display of some sort, right? It's like it's trying to pull you out of your focus so that you can see something that you haven't been seeing that might be in your environment already, right? Okay, so it's gorgeous. I love this sort of energy, even though like it may be, I want to say like emotional. There feels like healing is not a pretty process, right? It's not all flowers and rainbows, right? It does take like tears and blood and sweat and like grit to go through this. Okay, next you have the Six of Pentacles and the Two of Wands. This is actually an interesting energy today. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I'm with the Six of Pentacles, I was seeing this as almost like, you know how people call, like, it's like witch hunting. I feel like that was like sort of an energy that's being shifted here, where witches used to be hunted, right? They used to be sort of burned at the stake kind of thing. But that energy is being shifted now, where the witchiness of sort of women, right? Which is connection to intuition, right? The ability to manifest and all that through intuition and connection with higher sources and all of that is much more sort of commonplace, is kind of how it's feeling. So it definitely feels like you're healing some sort of like feminine energy within yourself, or a dynamic between you and a previous perhaps relationship in some way, of like healing that, of not sort of going on a witch hunt metaphorically, and actually just accepting that there are things about sort of this feminine energy that are misunderstood in some way. That's how I'm going to leave that. I don't know. I feel like that this, because it's kind of just like she's just sitting there with her cat and her frog, which are both very like kind of witchy familiars, right? It's like understanding that this one has, or feminine energies in general have sort of these, my throat's like closing up now all of a sudden, have these sort of like mystical kind of dynamics or energy exchanges with like familiars, like connection to intuition is basically what I'm going to leave it at. Okay. This Two of Wands, this just talks to me about dreaming. So you may be like having sort of like strange dreams, or like, because I'm looking at this archway, right? Something to do with like almost like opening portals in your dreams or something like that. I'm not sure exactly what this is talking about, but actually now I'm looking at this card, the Work Your Light Oracle, which I will bring up at the end of this in the extended, but it says take a break, a life's work, not a season. Get off the treadmill. So that may be what this is talking about, just because these two energies are looking the same to me. It's like I feel like maybe you're just spending a lot of time resting or sleeping, especially if you're going through like a healing process that's absolutely necessary. So that's just sort of confirming that is what you should be doing, or that it is like normal. And all that through the healing process is to sleep and rest. Okay. And then to close off this section, you have the World card, right? This is, it's talking about completion, ending of a cycle. But what's interesting about this card is that it has sort of like a wing and a serpent. I feel like you're learning some sort of new thing about yourself, or about your patterns, or your past relationships perhaps, or dynamics, or things that have happened to you in the past, just generally, that's allowing you to sort of move on to whatever the next thing is, right? Like, because the forgiveness card I see is almost being like the Fool card, where it's like you can step into the next part because you've completed that section. You've gotten the knowledge or have the understanding in order for you to move forward, right? So that's what this energy is talking about, which is gorgeous, and I love that, and I feel like that's a beautiful like current energy to be in. So I'm going to move on to the next section, which is, where is an area of focus? I'm gonna say right off the bat that this feels like you in your connection, right? Like with your counterpart. You have here the ring in the box. Okay, so it's talking about, the ring talks about commitments in general, the things that you are wanting to commit to, or starting a new cycle. It could be just generally. The box talks about structure, right? Putting structure, or bringing sort of physicality onto the new commitments or the new cycles that you are stepping into. It's like you're about to step into like a new thing, right? I'm going to just generally leave it as that. The symbols might have more sort of meaning for you personally, but I don't want to put my own sort of bias or perspective on what this could mean for you. It's just talking about like commitments, a new cycle, that kind of thing, and putting structure onto that, making it physical in some way, or real, or tangible. Okay, just gonna leave it there. But what you have here is the synthesis card, which talks about coming together, but it also talks about the idea that like a small action on your part, or small shift, right? Like the flapping of a butterfly's wings has a magnifying effect on other people or other things in your world. It reflects and reflects and reflects, and has a much larger sort of effect on like the grand scheme of things. Even though what you're doing, or what you're thinking about, or what you're shifting within your life is having a much larger consequence or shift in the world in general, is what this card is talking about. What's so interesting about these cards, the tarot cards? So first you have the Nine of Cups, which is absolutely gorgeous, because look at these cards together, right? The ring and the Nine of Cups. But it's like a box, right? The figures here are forming the four walls of a box, right? So I feel like that's what this energy is talking about, and it looks like an atom. So like you're building something, you're putting the pieces together of creating some sort of structure for this next cycle of commitment, right? It's like once you step into this, it's kind of like you're committed, you have to see it through to the end, basically, is what this energy is talking about. I feel like that's what you're being asked to focus on, or something that you can focus on, is how to make, or how you can prepare yourself to step into this next cycle, because you're at the end of one, right? You're at the end of one cycle, and it's almost kind of like you're in this like quiet space in preparation for what the next thing is. And I feel like you already know, or if you don't know, it's going to be soon arriving with this this onion card sort of representing that Sagittarius reading, which I will link at the end of this video, which is talking about when you're in that sort of receptive space to just sort of receive something, right? Like if you're just peaceful, that's the perfect environment to welcome in this new thing that's absolutely going to like grow and expand and become something that is sort of like a long-term commitment, is what this is talking about. Absolutely gorgeous. Okay, I'm actually going to end it there for the reading. I'm going to go to the extended, so the link for that is in the description box below. I do have other videos if you're interested in checking those out. Thank you so much for sharing your energy with me, and I will see you in the next one. Bye.